on now, jump! Jump on now, jump! Jump on now!
Ultraverse comic books. Now that's excitement. Superheroes. First editions. Jump on now.
So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Unspoken Issues podcast. I am your host, Jesse Starcher, and we are going to be diving into some Ultraverse this evening. That's right. We don't go here too often. We've been there. You can go back in the archive. You can check out some of the previous Unspoken Issues episodes. And I think our very first one that we did, was it our first one that we did, Chris?
Yeah, our first episode was prototype number 1.
That's what I thought. So, yeah, you can check out our very first episode, not our 0 issue, our very first episode, where Chris and I talked about prototype number 1. And this evening, we're going to be doing 3 books. The man who thought of this, I'll let him kind of introduce the concept of what we're getting into here and why we're doing it. And then Chris will let us know here. But I got to intro our good buddy Evan Bevins coming on here to talk some Ultraverse. Just real quick, Evan, is Ultraverse something that you read back in the 90s, or is this kind of like your first kind of jump into it? Or
I remember I bought Strangers number 1 that we'll talk about in a little bit at the newsstand at the New Graham Pharmacy in Bluefield, Virginia. Just if you really want to know. I thought it was cool. I like the idea of getting it on the ground floor. And then I'm pretty sure I didn't buy any other issues. But on a church youth group trip to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, I bought the entire Ultraverse trading card set.
Oh, okay.
So I got the quick and dirty on all the characters.
Wow. Man, that's always a fun thing to do. Go on vacation and be like, okay, I want to go check out the comic store around here. Just see what it's like. I assume you read those cards at least once while you were, yeah. So you got a little bit of familiarity of the characters and the universe, the Ultraverse, if you will. So, Chris, what are we doing tonight? What is the plan and why are we doing it?
Well, this 2023 represents the 30th anniversary of the Ultraverse launch. And so I thought it'd be cool to look back at the launch titles, because the way Ultraverse worked, it was an entire new superhero universe kind of built out pre-launch. The books came out in waves. So like the first month, there was the books we're going to talk about tonight, Hardcase, Prime, and The Strangers was like the first wave. And then the following month, they launched, I think, 4 or 5 new titles. And then the following month, they launched a few more. By, maybe 5 or 6 months into it, they had an entire line of superhero books. But the launch titles were Hardcase, Prime, and The Strangers that came out in, I guess, June of 93. I was thinking it was a little earlier, but that summer. So I was on kind of the ground floor for Ultraverse. I thought that it looked kind of lame, going into it, like seeing ads for it and stuff. Image had launched about a year earlier.
Right.
And I believe the influx of cash that Malibu got from helping Image launch their books really helped them spearhead the Ultraverse. Ultraverse came from Malibu Comics.
Right.
They were the publishers of Ultraverse, the Ultraverse line. But yeah, I remember reading an article in Comic Scene magazine. There was an article about all of the new superhero universes that were launching that summer. So it was like Milestone, Deviant, I think, whatever Warriors of Plasm was. I think it was Deviant or Defiant. I think it was Defiant.
Yeah, Defiant.
And then Ultraverse and a few others were in their Comics Greatest World. And I read that Ultraverse article. It really sold me on the idea of at least giving them a chance, because it's a lot of the stuff in that article sounded cool. So when they hit the newsstands, I picked them up, and I was an Ultraverse convert from the day they launched. Pretty much, I was buying almost all of them, for the first few months that Ultraverse was around.
So you jumped on now.
Oh, absolutely.
Jump on now.
Unfortunately, I didn't see those commercials because I don't think they aired anywhere outside of
Right, dude. I never even knew they existed until Dean brought them up. I had no clue. At our comic shop, they were carrying Ultraverse at this point. Let's just say comic books are becoming a very hot commodity at this point. This is a speculator market in the 90s, and number 1 issues are going to be hitting that you were probably going to do at least a little bit of sales just marketing something as, hey, it's the number 1 issue, guys.
Yeah.
Why not have all these publishers just be like, okay, yeah, let's put these number ones out there and let's get these universes started and see what we can do. So yeah, as for Ultraverse, I knew it existed, but I didn't pick up anything off the shelf when it was out. For me, when it came to comic books, I mean, back in the 90s, it was Image Comics, then Marvel, then DC or Valiant. I'd almost say Valiant edges out DC for me when it comes to what was getting my dollars. Yeah. And then Malibu got practically nothing. Like they got very, very little. So all these characters that are in this universe were completely foreign to me until about 5 or so years ago when I decided, okay, I'm going to maybe a little bit earlier than that, maybe about 10 years ago, when I decided to do the podcast, there were a bunch of people that were like, let's cover Lord Pumpkin. And I'm like, what is that? What is a Lord Pumpkin? I have no idea what you guys are talking about. And then
I've got his card here.
And then Dean talked to me about writing an article for the Unspoken Decade, which got me involved there. And of course, the one single article that I wrote was about the cartoon series, the Ultraverse.
Fantastic.
Yes. And I learned so much. And it's great to kind of get into these issues that we're going to be talking about tonight, because there is a lot of that's in the cartoon. Mm-hmm. A lot. Go ahead.
The Ultraverse cartoon was almost like, I mean, it was based on the Ultraverse team, but it was kind of like the Ultraverse cartoon because they touched on a lot of other different characters besides just the members of the Ultraverse.
I think we were at one point, either we had it on the agenda, we were going to talk Sludge. I think it was Sludge's Christmas special or whatever it was. Yeah. I know I'm pretty sure Sludge is in the cartoon. A lot of what we're going to talk about here tonight that happens in Hardcase, there's quite a few characters that pop up in the cartoon there. We're going to start with Hardcase tonight, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I was thinking that these books all came out like a week apart and that it was Hardcase first, Prime, and then Strangers, but apparently Hardcase and Prime both dropped on the same day.
Same day?
June 15th of 93. Is that right, Evan?
That is what I was thinking.
Okay. And then Strangers, I guess, came a couple weeks later. But I think Hardcase is probably the best place to start just because he is in the lore of the Ultraverse. He's the first known Ultra as far as superheroes and stuff. So,
all right. So this is Hardcase number 1, story titled Winners Never Quit. What's our creative team, Evan?
It was written by James Hudnall, penciled by Jim Callahan, inked by Norm Brayfogle, who we'll see some other work by. In just a little bit. Letter by Tim Eldred, color designer Paul Mounts, and Chris Ulm is the editor.
June of 1993 cover date. We open our story in March of 92. Our hero Hardcase and his superhero friends Starburst, DJ Blast, and Forza have all nearly been decimated by a being called NME. In a desperate bid to survive, DJ Blast detonates a large shockwave, obliterating everything around him. Hardcase was able to grab Starburst and escape, but unfortunately, she has brain damage and remains in a coma. A year later, Hardcase is trying to move on. Feeling responsible for his friend's deaths and Starburst's coma, he has forgotten the hero lifestyle and is now a movie star. It isn't until a robbery at a local bank that Hardcase decides he has a responsibility to fight crime. Facing off with a robber, a supervillain thug named Headknocker, the two exchange blows. It isn't until Hardcase is filled with unbridled rage that he slams Headknocker with a police car, ending the fight and declaring to the world that Hardcase is back. While the event is covered on the news, a strange green-haired naked man wonders why Hardcase isn't dead after the encounter a year ago with NME. And I think that's where we end. Chris, I'm going to defer to you here first. This is our opening comic, the opening salvo of the Ultraverse of Malibu. What are your thoughts here?
I love this comic. It's one of my favorites. It does a really good job of not only setting up Hardcase and giving you kind of his backstory and his motivation, it also spends some time setting up the world, like with other Ultras. You know, we get to see the guy at the end of the issue talking about NME was like, you know, a reference to NME. It's pretty brutal. It's kind of like a mix between what Marvel was doing and what Image gave you. It's not as violent as some of like the more hardcore Image stuff, but it is got, especially the fight at the beginning is pretty gory.
Well, yeah, guys' legs are laying on the ground and they're trying to figure out which body part belongs to that guy and who. Yeah, it is pretty gruesome.
Yeah, and you know, the art it's listed as Jim Callahan as penciler and Norm Brayfogle as the inker, and Brayfogle is doing a lot of the heavy lifting because we see later issues where Callahan is the penciler, and he's not bad necessarily, but it's a far cry from what we get in this issue. We can definitely tell that Brayfogle really embellished a lot and added a lot of flavor to the book. Yeah, that's my quick thoughts. I really like this issue. Hardcase is one of my favorite of the Ultraverse characters. So
Enemy is like how heavily
the love
inspired.
Child of the Alien and the Predator.
Yeah. Right. Very good comparison there, because it very much looks like a xenomorph, but it's just got all these weapons, and I assume it's like made of. I'm pretty certain it's made of like some kind of crazy alloy or something. Almost,
it looks metallic.
Near indestructible. Clearly a force to be reckoned with as Hardcase, he's invulnerable, right? Like, I think he's got invulnerability, super strength, from what I understand. Yeah. But when you open this book up, Hardcase has gone through it.
Yeah, he got a black eye. He's bleeding from his mouth. Part of his costume is kind of tattered. You look at the other members of the squad, which is his team. The kind of the first Ultraverse superhero team. He's clearly made of sterner stuff than these other guys, because the teammates, apparently Enemy goes for the legs first, because both of his teammates have their legs torn off.
Right.
At least the males. The woman is unconscious. Yeah, we see right away how formidable Enemy is, and we don't see him again in this issue. But yeah, it's clearly a tough start for Hardcase, and this brutal opening is probably one of the things that really hooked me as a 13-year-old reading this for the first time.
Right. That's exactly how Image got me when I was reading their comics, and just, that was always the calling card to me. Was like, okay, man, you'll never see this in a Marvel comic. You won't see the heroes, losing their limbs or disemboweled. You just don't see it.
Yeah, you wouldn't see that at Marvel then. Now, every couple of years, Marvel has somebody get ripped in half, literally, to the point where there's no shock value anymore. But yeah, I can see how that would have been striking. I don't think I'd read anything with Hardcase before this. When Marvel acquired Malibu and started kind of, not so much folding the Ultraverse in there, but exporting some of their characters to the Ultraverse, I read a few of those. But I don't know that I ever read anything with Hardcase. So I do remember that he was a superhero / movie star. But yeah, that was a pretty shocking opening for sure, and it has a lot of familiar tropes in it, but at the same time, it wasn't like what you were getting back then. This was a guy who'd already given up on being a hero, and was coming back to it, which was kind of an interesting way to launch your superhero universe with there already being these heroes existing. But this and some of the others we're going to talk about did a good job of making that world feel three-dimensional and lived in, tying things together without making it seem forced. Once you get past the dude walking around naked in there, you'll see Prime on one of those view screens. Yeah, my notes say naked Thanos, the guy behind the scenes. There's some ongoing story threads and subplots set up, like his co-star, who's washed up child star trying to reinvigorate his career.
Justin Kuttner is his name. I have him down here on my notes. I didn't include him in on the synopsis, but I was curious. Chris, you'd probably know. I assume this guy is going to be a thorn in Hardcase's side for a little bit, or tell me he doesn't just go away.
He definitely returns in the Ultras. I'm honestly not 100% sure if Hardcase has to deal with him later, but I know he appears in other comics.
Oh, okay. He definitely seems like he's going to be a problem, but he's just an annoyance right now. So,
right.
Yeah.
I don't know. Chris will probably know about this, but I couldn't help but notice that on that opening page where we've got the graffiti behind Hardcase, it has the same symbol as is on Headknocker's head.
Oh yeah.
So
the upside down anarchy symbol, right? Is that right? Isn't that anarchy symbol? And why that is legitimately my next note. Is Headknocker is such a doof. Like, he is portrayed as an idiot in the cartoon.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, here he's just this, overbearing, violent, aggressive thug.
His thing with the robbery, I mean, they do a good job, even though he is, like you said, kind of an idiot. I mean, when he punches the one security guard, speaking of things you didn't see a lot in comics, is when people get punched by a super strong guy, they just fall down.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, so that was kind of interesting.
Gosh.
It wasn't just played for, gruesomeness or brutality, or at least I didn't take it that way.
Right. Threw the guy across the building.
Yeah. I haven't seen the cartoon. I hope "Come to Daddy, schmuck" is his catchphrase.
Hardcase he doesn't fit into here's your flagship superhero.
I was going to say his attitude it's especially amped up in the Ultraverse comic, but he seems to have sort of similar attitude like somebody like Dragon in the Savage Dragon comics, where he kind of feels like he's above a lot of the superhero stuff. He's more of like a working man superhero, where like a blue collar superhero almost, even though he's like a movie star and stuff. But the cover is from Dave Gibbons, legend of Watchmen fame and other stuff.
Oh,
obviously.
Wow.
I love the shoulder pads on Hardcase. That's a classic 90s thing. And,
yeah.
It needs more pouches.
That's true. Yeah, they lean more into that instead of the pouches, I guess. The Mr. Loan who shows up at the bank wanting to withdraw all of his money, that is technically a cameo because that's a character who comes back. It's Solitaire, who has his own comic launching later, a few months after this. The movie Clacker, where he's when Hardcase is on set, we see the director Dan Doan.
So Chris said the director's name was Dan, and it looks like his actual name was Darren Doan. Wanted to make sure that we gave credit where credit was due. Now back to it.
That's the director of the Hardcase short film they used as like a promo video.
Yes, that's what I was going to ask you about. I was going to ask.
It's only maybe 4 or 5 minutes long, I think. I've watched it a couple times, but it's been several years. You can find it on YouTube. But it's just a guy in a Hardcase, costume fighting some bad guys, like muggers probably. And it was done as like a promo for the comic, I think, before the comic came out. And then, of course, also there was the Firearm VHS tape. Dan Doan might have directed that as well. That's a longer one. That's like a 30 or 40-minute short film. Not really related to this, but I took my copy of the Firearm VHS to Horror Hound last year and had it signed by the guy who played Firearm, because he's also the guy who plays Michael Myers in the new Halloween movies.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I popped out on the table, and he was like, "Whoa, I haven't seen one of these in a while."
Wow, that's awesome.
But he remembered it, obviously, yeah, and that was kind of cool. The only other thing I got, the name Head Knocker, I thought it was really dumb when I was a kid, and it's kind of grown on me, I'll be honest. Maybe because I've read this comic 50 times.
So it seems like it fits that guy.
Yeah, he would come up with that. I think the man who isn't a man at the end is modeled on a naked Jean-Claude Van Damme. I'd know those bare buns anywhere, guys.
Oh, come on, get out of here.
That's got to be Van Damme. But that's pretty much all I got. I really like this comic.
I don't know how to respond to that.
That's hilarious. Well, let's pick a panel. So, Chris,
I want to know which one you picked, Jesse.
Yes, as a matter of fact. Well, what's funny is I don't think I until I was scanning this again, I almost picked a different one, and then I was like, no, wait a second, that's the one right there.
This is actually kind of a tough one because I really like the art in this issue. Like I said, mostly because I think Brayfogle puts his stamp on it. It's easy to go with, some of the slaughter at the beginning. I'm actually going to go with, it's page 21, second panel, and it's the image of Hardcase collapsing into that car and crushing it pretty much. I like that panel quite a bit, and I like the sound effect.
Yeah,
that's what I got.
He gets launched from Head Knocker, who's coming right at him through the wall onto a car down below.
The fight with Head Knocker, Hardcase really goes through like a journey here because he gets utterly defeated, at the beginning. He's really hesitant to jump into a fight when he hears about the bank robbery going on before he finally decides to do it. And then when he gets there, he's kind of getting his ass kicked, and he knows that Head Knocker is more powerful than him. He kind of acknowledges it in the issue, but he still finds the resolve to, come out on top or whatever. But anyway.
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, his journey, because he was done. I mean, as soon as his friends, the squad, I forgot that that's what they were called. As soon as the squad was killed, or at least and I think he was involved with Starburst at the time that all went down, right?
Yeah, it's his girlfriend, and she doesn't die, but she's in a coma that they don't think she's ever gonna wake up from.
Right. I mean, at that point, you're like, I'm done. I'm never going to do anything like this again, no matter how strong I am. Clearly, it's not enough to keep the people that I love safe. So I'm just going to stop doing it. And then he has that, I don't know if it's a security guard friend or that friend of his. It was his friend. I think it was a fan. The security guard that came up to him, got an autograph or whatever. When he heard that there was a bank robbery and the guy was like, we could use some help. And he's like, not my thing. And then it started weighing on him. You could tell he was like, okay, I should probably go do something. And when he does, he's outmatched, but then he really does pull himself up and is able to win the day and then declare to everybody that Hardcase is back, baby. Hardcase is back. All right, Evan Bevins, panel time. What do you got?
I got page 24, the full page after he has beaten Headknocker. His internal monologue the whole time, Headknocker was stronger than him. He was really wondering if he could pull this off, and then he's kind of going through that thought process of, looks like retirement is out of the question. But it's just cool. It gives you the extent of the fight. Not as gruesome, but there's blood and everything, so it's not quite the same aftermath you're used to seeing in comic book battles, which is just some debris and the guy unconscious. You can even see Hardcase breaking a sweat. That it wasn't just a clean and easy victory. Right. So I thought that was a pretty striking angle and pretty good. Kind of sums up what happened, and you can see the gears turning in his head about what's coming next.
Headknocker just laying there, bleeding from his nose, unconscious. And it's nice size, it's good size splash page. Good stuff. There's a few splash pages in here. The one I almost went with was Headknocker charging at, that page, you could tell. It's like, okay, I've got a character that I want to do. I want to draw a page up, and then where am I going to stick this? Oh, okay, got a perfect spot for it. Headknocker coming at you. I didn't go with it. I didn't go with that. Folks, I already posted it like a week ago on the website, and that is Hardcase with a 90s knot reference. Picking up the car, and what does he say here? Where are you going, wimp? Running away? And then Hardcase turns around, hits him with the car, and yells, "Not." Perfect. No, doesn't get much more 90s than that. So there you go.
One of the cool things about Ultraverse was, they launched with a lot of money, so they got really high quality paper. All the at least the direct market editions had the glossy pages, and they had like state of the art coloring. Even though the artists on Ultraverse comics were kind of there were a lot of changeovers, a lot of really good art, and a lot of kind of subpar art. But they always looked nice as far as the coloring and the pages and stuff. The lettering, especially these page where he's beating the crap out of Headknocker with the car, there's a lot of really cool like sound effects, and the page where early in the issue where Enemy flings Forza off of after he's got him impaled on his finger there. There's a fling sound effect, and it's kind of like
it is. It's
part of the motion of him flinging him off of his hand.
So
and
cool.
That was probably the first time I'd ever seen something like that in a comic. And
that's actually really cool. Comics that do have those sound effects, that onomatopoeia that's in there, and a great letterer to do that. I mean, that's a perfect example of just putting that extra flair on a panel to make it really stand out. And yeah, dude, I don't think I've ever seen anything like that, because it's written backwards at first, and then it kind of wraps around as the guy is thrown off of him. That's pretty neat.
You sure about this? Ultraverse Comics. Let's do it.
They couldn't be there in 48 for the launch of that Super Guy, or in 62 for the launch of that Spider Guy, but they can be there now for the birth of the Ultraverse.
How bad you want it? How bad you want it? I want it! This way.
All sold out.
Wait, this is a commercial. Commercials always have happy endings.
Just kidding.
Prime Hardcase, first editions in comic shops June 16th.
Well, that was Hardcase number 1. We're jumping in. We're going to go into Prime number 1. As Chris had said earlier, this was released on the same day, around the same day. We went with Hardcase first. We're going to talk Prime number 1 next. Before we get into the synopsis, Chris, tell me about your experience with Prime.
Okay. I'm fairly certain I bought Prime first. And then when I liked it, I went back and got Hardcase and then maybe The Strangers. If people ask me that aren't really comic people what my favorite superhero is, I usually just say Captain America because that's one everybody kind of knows because of the movies. But in reality, he's a little further down the list because Darkhawk is definitely my favorite. And then probably Prime, maybe Bad Rock after that. So all the teen heroes from when I was a kid, basically. And then we get to Captain America and some of the other guys. So yeah, Prime is definitely, one of my favorites. And this is a comic that really blew me away as a kid, partially because the art is so insane at times.
Yeah.
And it's also it's a take on, the Shazam model of a boy who gets, can transform himself into a superpowered hero. But I didn't know anything about Shazam at the time. So I always thought of him more as a Superman type character that a little boy or a young boy could turn into.
Mm-hmm.
And then over the years, I've kind of learned more. Oh, well, that was more of a Captain Marvel trope or a Shazam, whatever. But yeah, I love Prime. And of all the Ultraverse comics, which I love most of, far and away, Prime is my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah, this is probably the one hero that I knew of first from Ultraverse that I knew was around. I don't know if it's because I saw something in Wizard about it or if I just saw it on the shelves, but
it seemed like he was the breakout character, if there was one, of the Ultraverse universe.
Yeah, I was going to say if you took Hardcase and Prime, stood beside each other, you look at Prime, you're like, well, that's a superhero. I mean, you got a red cape, muscle bound like you wouldn't believe. Chest plate, big P on the chest. I mean, that is
$1 million smile.
Yeah, far and away. You're like, well, that's a superhero right there. There you go. Evan, any experience with Prime other than your Ultraverse cards?
I think I got one of the issues where they started tying in with Marvel, where he primed up as a Spider-Man analog.
Spider Prime.
I knew bits and pieces about Prime. I knew it was a kid with this super adult body, which actually I was a little disappointed. I knew that reading this issue because they don't really reveal that.
No, they don't. They do not.
Except they do in ads for Hardcase. Yeah. In Hardcase, there's an ad for Prime that it's like, he's the world's greatest superhero. If only he could tell his mom. But I mean, even knowing that, it makes you appreciate some of the details in the issue that I thought were really well done.
Right.
That maybe you wouldn't notice the first time through if you didn't know that. It's not an issue that hinges solely on the surprise. It works beyond that.
Okay. Well, our story is titled Prime Time. And our creative team is Lynn Straczewski and Gerard Jones on writing, Norm Brayfogle on art, Tim Eldred on letters, Paul Mounts on color design, and Chris Ulm editor. So this, again, like I said, June of 1993. The mysterious hero Prime is new to the superhero scene, but already making an impact. We open this story with a mysterious man talking to some of those who have had the unfortunate opportunity to run into Prime. A gym teacher that preys on innocent girls and the resident of a crack house all give their stories on how Prime appeared and turned the tables on them. The gym teacher was put in the hospital while the crack dealer's home was destroyed. Both recounted how powerful Prime was, sometimes surprising himself with his power. The crack dealer got some of Prime's goop that came from his body during the confrontation. The mystery man that was interviewing these people takes the sample and kills the dealer in the process. Prime also heads to Somalia at this point and ends up right in the middle of a confrontation standoff with some terrorists in the UN. Now, when the terrorists begin to open fire with some heavy artillery, Prime can take anything they can dish out until he begins to melt. Rocketing home at super speed, Prime crashes through the window of an abandoned building and continues to deteriorate until all that is left is a young boy covered in the goop that once was Prime. And there you go. That is the synopsis for issue 1 of Prime.
I mean, this one just grabs you right from the start. I mean, that opening page is pretty striking.
Gosh, man, look at Breyfogle's art. I mean, it's just crazy. Go ahead.
I mean, yeah, that's just, so over the top, but then as you read and you start to get an idea about who or what Prime is, I mean, the fact that it's so over the top is part of the story.
Yeah.
And then just so many good details. Like I said, I don't know if I would have read as much into it. I think I would have noticed, but like with him not knowing his own strength, or as strong as he is, when the coach tries to kick him, he flinches away because he's still new in this body.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, a lot of good details there, and they really do build this mystery up. Even though, like I said, I knew eventually that we'd see Prime wasn't as big as what he was showing us. That the scene where he's kind of melting away and the kid emerges, I mean, that's really cool. Even, like I said, knowing what it was, that's really striking and just really gets your attention. And the art is fantastic on it.
Yeah.
And then, but of course, you know me, I also get lost in some of the details. I mean, I don't want to, I wouldn't nominate either of these guys for Man of the Year, but so the pervert coach, like, oh, we just shot him with a tight beam of radiation, so he'll never have sexual urges again.
Right.
But then the drug dealer, like, we're just going to kill him.
I don't know.
Of course, maybe they were just weirded out by, he's like, yeah, I got some of this ooze off that guy. I'm going to smoke it later.
Smoke it. Oh, man.
I don't know if it's possible for a supporting character in the first issue of a comic to jump the shark, but that guy might have done it. Kids, we want you to understand, drugs are really bad. This guy will literally smoke anything.
Oh, man. If you didn't know there was a kid in this body, we had no idea about the ads, whatever. And you could pick this issue up and you had no idea what was going on. They do get it across that there is a kid in this guy's body. And that makes sense at the end.
Yeah. But at the beginning, showing, it doesn't. They're not telling. Yeah,
exactly. At the beginning, you don't know that. You just real, timid. He doesn't realize. I didn't mean to break your arm. I didn't mean to break it. But
he's freaked out by it.
Yeah, he has no idea. But then he's like, he just like headlong into the battle over in Somalia, like just getting shot and grenades thrown at him. And he's just sitting there. He's like, all right, bring it on. He doesn't know and he doesn't understand the body that he's in. He shows up at the crack dealer's house. He's like, all right, no more crack, which is hilarious. I think that's exactly no more crack. That's exactly what a kid would say.
Yeah.
That is exactly
this is the source of crack in the U.S.
No.
Even when he goes over to Somalia, okay, I'm just going to go over here and beat up the bad guys. Like he probably has no idea why people are fighting in Somalia. He's just seen on the news that horrible things are happening and he wants it to stop.
Right.
It reminds me of that scene, and I can't remember the specifics, but there's a scene in Grant Morrison's Action Comics from the New 52, where the Justice League is fairly new, and Superman's like, okay, so none of you guys want to, I forget if it's Somalia or wherever, none of you guys want to go over to Somalia and sort that out? And, Batman and Wonder Woman are like, yeah, we can't just go impose our will on a foreign country. Yeah.
Kids
and at the same time, he's also like, and nobody's going to take these hamsters that I rescued from, the child molester's house. Superman, he just thinks the world should be a certain way. So
right.
And so yeah, that kind of reminded me of that. Prime's like, I am going to punch all the bad things, and everything will be better.
What are you thinking, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, no surprise. I love I love this issue. Every kind of second everything Evan was saying there. Breyfogle is unbelievable. This, he's known best, I think, for his Batman stuff in like the 80s and early 90s, which I've only read parts of. But this is kind of like Breyfogle Unleashed. Like, he joins up with the Ultraverse company, and they kind of just let him kind of go crazy with this. I mean, he talked about Bart Sears being
muscles on muscles. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, this is the extreme version. And, that works for the character. Obviously, a little kid, that's what he thinks is like Arnold times 3 is the physique he's going to want. The gnarly compound fracture definitely made an impression when I saw that as a kid. him like just walking through the fire, the flamethrower, the drug dealer.
Yeah.
Compared to him sprinkling him with a garden hose. We see for the first time, I think, when they try and shoot him at the drug house, some of the bullets, kind of splurt back out of his body. And we see like the goopy power set. It's a kind of an interesting change of pace from what we would think of looking at this guy. You think he's just going to be a Superman type, like a new overly muscled Superman. But he's definitely got some weird stuff going on with his powers. That first full page battle with like the military guys when the tanks shoot him in the back, and then he turns around and he's taking it full on in the chest, and then he just smashes through a tank. It's not a splash page because it's like 4 different panels. But yeah, it's there are no panel borders or anything. It's all just kind of one image, almost like a dream sequence or something like that.
4 primes on that page, and they're not separated by anything. But it looks awesome.
Even more so than Hardcase, this prime number 1 gives a broader view of like the Ultraverse landscape, because we see the news report where they talk about Hardcase and they reference him visiting his girlfriend in the hospital. They do there's a page on Prototype and what's going on with him, which is a book that doesn't come out for a couple more months. This news report, Al Baker, publisher of Ultra Monthly, that's the guy on the report, and Ultra Monthly is a quote unquote magazine that they actually published.
Oh, seriously?
So yeah, I think they were 99 cents maybe, or maybe even like 49 cents, because they were only like maybe 12 pages.
Yeah, it's advertised in the back of this issue.
So yeah, it's written from the perspective of like characters in the Ultraverse publishing this book. And I think they did 6 or 8 of them. And they're pretty interesting too. They're like a nice companion to the Ultraverse comics.
That's pretty cool. That's really cool.
I guess the elephant in the room, Gerard Jones, who's one of the writers. He was a big writer on a lot of Ultraverse comics, and a lot of people have even said they say it's hard to read Prime now, given what happened to him. People can Google it if they want. He's a dirtbag. I just assume that Lynn Traszewski is the writer of Prime now. I just ignore Gerard Jones' involvement pretty much.
Remember opening this book up, and this front page, and Prime is about ready to beat the crap out of this gym teacher who's been immediately you're drawing parallels. Mm-hmm. You're like, wait a second, what about the guy that wrote this? What is? Wait a second.
And like the idea that you should just like throw, I can't read this now because of Gerard Jones. Like, well, I can understand that, and I wouldn't like judge anybody for taking that position, but like you're also ignoring like the other people that worked on this book and the work they put into it, and there's no way to know like what plot points and what stuff Traszewski was putting into the book as opposed to what Gerard Jones was saying and stuff. So who knows?
I mean, I have the same thing. I can still go back, and watch the Avengers movies and Buffy and all this stuff, even though we found out Joss Whedon wasn't what we thought he was. But I can't even think about. I mean, Bill Cosby was one of the funniest people I've ever seen, and I can't even think about watching anything of his.
Yeah,
slightly different circumstances. I myself react in different ways depending on the project and the person. So yeah, I couldn't fault Chris for still loving Prime, and I couldn't fault somebody else who was like, nah, I can't read that.
You mentioned the world building. That was one of my notes. I put in here definitely a great intro issue. You don't need to know everything, and we don't really get shown everything. We've already talked about that, and there's still a lot on the table. Like, how did this boy get a hold of this? What is going on? How is he able to do this? What is this goop? Where's it coming from? Who's the mysterious guy? So there's a lot of great mysteries that I'm sure are going to fill the pages of the rest of these issues as they roll out.
I want to read the next issue. Chris, you got one of those laying around anywhere?
Send it on over.
I'm fairly sure I do.
All right, well, let's pick panels. And I'm taking the moment that Prime gets hit. Well, I shouldn't say the moment, because he gets hit by the terrorists, and then he turns around and he's just filled with rage, and he starts just getting obliterated. But the panel that I'm taking is the one after he looks at his hand and he starts to see that he's melting. And he's got this horrified look on his face as goop is just pouring from the holes in his chest and all over his body.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh man, I've got to get out of here. At that point, he leaves. But the look on his face and just the fact that he is falling apart, it's a moment in the book where you're like, oh, what is going on now? Evan, we'll let you go next.
I'm going with that first page.
Oh,
Apparently, when I pick panels, I just pick entire pages. It sucks you in right away. I'm not going to say it lets you know what the whole issue is going to be like, but it kind of sets you off balance. It makes you really curious to know what the heck is going on here. The ridiculous muscles, that's not, 90s excess art. That is part of the story. Totally. I think you said it, Chris. It reminds me of in Kingdom Come, where Batman says, well, Captain Marvel was Billy Batson's idea of, what a perfect adult role model should be or whatever. And this is this kid's fantasy about being a superhero.
Yeah.
One thing before you get to pick yours, Chris, I forgot all about the cheesy Prime lines that he would roll.
Yeah.
That is the Prime directive.
Oh yeah.
And again, that is,
he does that in the cartoon as well.
That is what a kid would do, though. I mean, that is exactly what a kid would do. So, it's good stuff. All right.
Some adults make really bad puns in such too.
Yeah.
I've heard.
That's what I've seen. All right. What's your pick, Chris?
Almost every other page you could find a panel that would be appropriate for a best panel. Speaking of the one that Evan just picked, like that opening page where just the look on Prime's face, like the lighting, it's all, half of his face is all dark and shaded, but you can still see the eyebrows tensed up and the veins in his head, like how angry he is. It's an awesome panel. It's part of the battle with the terrorists. It's page 19, and there's that 3-grid panel in the middle of the page where they throw the grenade and he catches it, and there's that great spap sound effect, and then it blows up. And my panel is the third panel where he's kind of charred, and his hand is kind of starting to melt a little bit. He's just got a smile on his face, and he's laughing at the soldier that threw the grenade at him. That's my panel.
Yeah, he is out testing his limits.
Yeah,
and I think when he catches the grenade and he realizes that didn't hurt that bad, and that's where that smile's coming from.
Can't believe none of us picked the him emerging from the Prime Jello mold.
I thought that's where you would go. Yeah,
or I can't. Vomiting all over the floor in the last page.
Yeah.
Well, Jesse, you can't predict what I'm going to do, and that's a prime example.
Oh.
We're talking bass fishing all day, all night.
Infestation flood onto the rock.
Antoine, come back! I love you!
Ultraverse comic books on sale today.
Comic book store. Let's go.
They couldn't be there in 48 for the launch of that Super Guy, or in 62 for the launch of that Spider Guy, but they can be there now for the birth of the Ultraverse.
Whoa.
Line! That way!
Prime Hardcase, first editions in comic shops June 16th.
Well, there's Prime number 1, and we're about to get into our next and final book, and that is going to be The Strangers number 1. So our creative team, Steve Englehart, the author, Rick Hoberg, pencils, Tim Eldred on letters, Tim Burgard, inks, Chris Ulm, editing, and Paul Mounts, color design. Story is titled Jumpstart. So before we get into The Strangers, again, I already told you guys, I'm not picking up Ultraverse titles. Chris, tell me about The Strangers. Was this a title that you were getting?
Yeah, it was. I don't think I kept up with The Strangers as long as some of the others, but I definitely got it, and I liked it quite a bit. I liked it more, I think, as a kid than I do now, for reasons I'll go into when we kind of break down the issue. But yeah, it's a cool concept, like these 6 or 7 strangers that are all on a streetcar that gets hit by mysterious lightning, and they all develop powers and quickly kind of catch up to each other later once they realize what's going on, and kind of become a team that way. One of the big problems with the Ultraverse, they're creating 90, 120, whatever superpowered characters for their universe in just like a month's time or a couple months' time, trying to get it launched. And so one of the things that you're going to be struggling with in that is what are we going to call these guys? So you end up with characters like Adam Bob, which is probably the worst superhero name.
I think you meant best.
Well, sure. I mean, it's all relative. And Electrocute, which I think I remember her being called Electrocutie. Maybe that was in like one of the articles. Maybe that was like an early name, and they just decided to call her Electrocute later, which she's like a robot that gets electrical powers.
I can confirm that the official Ultraverse trading card refers to her as Electrocute.
Okay. All right.
But there are some cool ones too, like Spectral is a cool name, and he's a cool character. And Grenade, not a bad name, especially given his power set. So it's not all bad. I like The Strangers. It's not one of my favorite Ultraverse books now, but at the time, I definitely was into it.
That was my introduction to it. I thought it was a fantastic concept. I mean, that could have been the launch book for all of it. I know at least one other book came out of it. They had the established stuff with Hardcase and things like that. So, but I mean, I don't know who owns the rights to it, and I certainly don't need everything to be turned into a movie. But I mean, I'm not sure how, with all the comic book stuff getting thrown against the wall to see what sticks, that somebody hasn't gone, hey, this is a perfect concept for a streaming show.
I wasn't picking up The Strangers. I wasn't doing anything with The Strangers. I had no idea what in the world or who The Strangers were. I think they were
strangers to you.
Yes, they were, as a matter of fact. I think they do have an episode in the cartoon, if I remember correctly. And
yeah, I think that was one of the, it was like a backdoor pilot type deal.
Yeah, okay. This was cover dated, according to what I'm seeing here, June of 93. On a cable car in San Francisco, 50-plus people are trying to enjoy their commute when billionaire J.D. Hunt's unyielding public display of affection with his lady friend Candy begins to become a little much. Riders and friends Bob and Hugh take matters into their own hands, removing J.D. from the cable car. This is just the weirdest way to open this comic. Like, some dude's making out with some chick, and the people in the car are like, "Get off of here!" But anyway.
I mean, he's a jerk, but I'm pretty sure the only people who committed a crime were Bob and Hugh and the other guy.
Right. Just then a large...
You could throw people off of vehicles for being annoying. I would have been thrown off a lot of vehicles.
Just then a large beam of energy zaps the cable car and those around it. The cable car careens out of control, hitting a small Mazda Miata. Luckily, no one on the cable car was hurt, but the man in the Miata is taken to the hospital with a big, I think he had like metal sticking out of his head. As all of the passengers go
He's
on
about... have a rough night, man.
He said Nightman. He said Nightman. As all of the passengers go on about their day, Hugh and Bob begin to realize they have some peculiar powers that are beginning to manifest. Other passengers begin to find out that they could do strange things as well. When a strange cloud appears over the city, a mysterious lady appears in the street speaking an alien language. As the police are trying to remove her, she begins to lash out. Bob and Hugh go to confront her, thinking that their powers may help the situation. They soon realize they may be outmatched, but are then joined by Elena LaBrava, Dave Castiglione, and young Leon Bradford, and Candy, the lady that J.D. Hunt was trying to make out with there. All passengers from the cable car that morning, all with newfound powers. Individually, they are not a match for the alien woman, but using their abilities together, they get the upper hand until she flies away. With some time to themselves, these strangers decide they want some answers on how and why they got these powers. Their first mission will be to follow the mysterious alien woman to the strange cloud in the sky. So there you go. There is a lot that happens in this book.
Yeah.
A lot. You got a lot of characters that you've got to get across. You got to get their power sets across. But that being said, it's executed somewhat well. It's just there's a lot you've got to try and get across to hook the reader in, get your story out there. So
this is a pretty cool book, and the concept's really interesting. I think mostly my gripes are, and I don't want to besmirch Mr. Englehart because he's, a comic book legend pretty much. But he's writing in a style that's very reminiscent, I think, of his heyday, which would have been like the 70s and maybe the 80s.
Softly scented breezes.
And I don't mind so much like the captions, but like the problem is it's in this issue, but it's something that continues throughout the series. Like every time there's a scene with all of the 7 of the strangers, almost every panel, every character has to say something. It's like he's got to give every character a moment to get a line in. I want to say I saw it's a quote from him somewhere, or maybe it was somebody in a reference to his writing style, that the way he writes dialogue is every sentence needs to end with either an exclamation point or a question mark.
Wow, does it ever?
And
Jeez.
And ever since I read that quote about him, or that he had said, I've noticed like that's the way. I mean, every word balloon, that's the way it is. There's something about the way he does the dialogue. It's just kind of hokey, and it just takes a long time to read a lot of these comics. The art is very good. I like Hoberg quite a bit. He's sort of like, to me, is sort of a cross between George Perez and Dan Jurgens. Those are the two guys he kind of reminds me of. He's not necessarily as good as either one of those, I don't guess, but I do like his art style, and it fits a team book really well. We not only get to see the introduction of all the strangers in this issue, but also Nightman. You don't know it's Nightman until his book starts a couple months later. But Johnny Domino. Yeah, he gets his powers pretty much through this incident as well.
Nightman ends up having a live action show, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm. He does, and I probably saw an episode or two when it came out, like in 96 or 7 or so. I believe it's on Tubi now. It's on some streaming service.
That's what I was going to say. I bet it's on Tubi.
But I'm pretty sure it's unbelievably bad. But I can't say for certain because I haven't watched an episode of it since I was a kid. I'm afraid to watch it again, honestly.
I think I saw part of one, and I'm not sure why, because it was a TV show featuring a comic book character that I actually knew about. So I'm not sure how I didn't watch it.
Didn't watch it.
It was in syndication, I'm sure, so it probably wasn't even available everywhere. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It just depended on who was carrying it or whatever.
I'm pretty sure I did con my parents into sending away for the Gambit versus Nightman #1. It was like $15 or something.
Yeah. Well done.
After being struck by lightning, a jazz musician gains the power to telepathically sense evil and becomes his city's nocturnal superhero.
Yeah, Englehart also is the Nightman writer, and it is similarly sometimes hard to get through those.
Oh, really?
And I'm being the minority on that. I know a lot of people who are Ultraverse. I'm in that Ultraverse group on Facebook. A lot of Ultraverse fans. Nightman, the Strangers are some of the most popular. So a lot of people, and Nightman's a great looking character, and a lot of the concepts in that book are really cool. I just sometimes struggle with the style of writing that he uses.
I don't know if you can keep this spoiler free or not, but I'm going to ask you about G. Lawrence Bushnell and his nurse Henrietta Hawkins.
All right.
So clearly something's happening there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they will come back at some point. One of the cool things about the Strangers concept is, they're on this cable car, the lightning strikes. Everybody on the cable car presumably is affected by it.
Yeah.
We only see the 7 who kind of get together at the end of this issue and kind of form the team. But as the series goes on, we see a lot of the other people that were on the car and how it affected them. Some of them make different choices, that lead them in different ways, and our heroes interact with them as time goes on.
All right,
Jesse, not to sound like a broken record, but I am looking at G. Lawrence Bushnell's card in the Ultraverse set as we speak.
What does he look like? Just describe him to me. Does he look like an old frail man, or does he look like death?
Well, he looks like an old frail man with a big scary monster behind him, and he goes by the name of Death Wish.
I knew death had something to do with it. He was dying of cancer in this book, and I'm like, and he's like, oh, I feel better all of a sudden. I'm like, and his nurse is like, I'm not feeling so good, and I'm like, oh, this is not going to be good.
Yeah.
Okay. As we know, he had a week to live. In the aftermath of the jumpstart, he found that he had become immortal. Then he found that his cancer had become immortal too. Now he lives in eternal, excruciating agony, wishing for death. With his wish unfulfilled, he lives only to share the pain of his cancer with others through death.
That did not go the way that I thought it was going to go. Man.
He's got his power chart. He's got an 8 on the strength scale from -2 to 12.
A -2.
His agility is a 4. Energy projections a 7. His combat skills are a 5, and his cool factor is a 12.
Oh yeah.
I'm pretty sure everybody's cool factor is a 12.
That was the best part of that trading card set. Everybody's a 12 on the cool factor.
Prototype's a 12 on the cool factor. Spectral is a 12 on the cool factor.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Should I?
I'm going to go ahead and just assume that holds true throughout.
That trend continues. Should I just kind of name the characters and their powers?
Yeah, definitely.
Lady Killer is sort of the leader. Elena LaBrava, I think's her name. She can use her clothes as weapons. And she has like really good eyesight, I believe, as well. Like she can see long distances. Grenade, that's Hugh, right? And he can kind of
Power is the inability to wear a shirt.
Yeah, he's got a great sort of vest with no shirt underneath kind of look going. Also shoulder pads, though. Don't forget those.
Yeah.
And he can kind of shoot shrapnel out of his body, not only his hands, but also like his chest, pretty much anywhere that's exposed, I guess. So, hey, it's functional. The vest with no shirt underneath is functional.
Nice.
Adam Bob, he sort of has the power to like transmutate items, kind of like Firestorm, I guess. He can transform things. Electrocute is the sex robot that J.D. Hunt, the a-hole that they threw off the train just in time to keep him from getting powers. She's an android, and she gets electrical powers, kind of like Electro. She gains like free will as well through the jump start. Zip Zap, Leon, is like a 12-year-old African-American, kind of embarrassing dialogue they give him in some of these books. We got a backwards cap on and some basketball shorts, and he's basically, he's a speedster. And then Spectral, I'm having trouble remembering Spectral's real name.
That's David Castiglione.
That's right. A little on the nose that they give the gay character the rainbow powers. He's kind of got like Human Torch type flame powers, but he can change, like depending on what color of the color spectrum he's using, it changes his powers. Like I believe red gives him super strength if he's got the red flames, and I forget what all they do, but like each color is a different power. And then Ural, or if that's how you pronounce it, looks kind of like Storm. And
is her code name Lavender Storm?
And she's an alien creature, an alien type character that they think might have some answers to where the jumpstart effect came from.
Right.
Jumpstart effect also is what gave Hardcase and the squad their powers. It just happened a year earlier.
Oh, okay.
There is, and I meant to mention this in the Hardcase section, but there is a squad miniseries that came out a couple years later that's like 4 issues, I think, and it kind of details the formation of the squad all the way up to their demise, basically.
Yeah.
I thought this was like a perfect setup, not only for the origin of those characters, but you've got all their villains built in too. And anybody on the car who doesn't use their powers in the best interest. Plus, I'm sure Mr. Hunt rated a trading card too, so I'm sure he's going to be a thorn in their side. But you get the hint that Bob's powers take something out of him, so there's a cost to them. Electrocute Candy, I thought that was a cool idea. Not everybody on the car was a human. Now you got a robot, and instead of being the obligatory sex bomb character, she's an android who's gaining sentience and can be more than eye candy. She gets kind of emotional there. You will believe that even an android can cry. That's just a reference, man.
It was all right.
Leaves you with all kinds of possibilities to keep going for a long time. Some of the dialogue is a little clunky or very dense. I mean, there's word balloons all over the place, but they're trying to explain to you who all these people are. A bit of an idea for most of them. Mm-hmm. So the one thing, again, me quibbling over details, there's like 2 or 3 lines where people are like, well, it's June. It doesn't rain in June. It's like, what? It rains in San Francisco. I mean, I get it that the cloud's significant, but I'm going along. I'm like, what? Is this part of
don't have weather
in the Ultraverse that it doesn't that you can tell what the weather? I mean, well, I started seeing tell what the weather is by the month, but that's just called observing. Wait a minute, there's a cloud. That's weird. I'm not sure why I didn't pick this up. I probably was like, well, this is kind of interesting, but I've got limited money and there's 58 X-Men titles I need to buy.
Right.
But I always, have remembered this for years, how cool I thought this was, and I wished I had followed it a little more. I mean, I think I sent to you guys in the chat. I've bought, some random Ultraverse stuff here and there, mostly the things that crossed over with Marvel, but it's not like it's super expensive. At least I've found plenty of very affordable Ultraverse things, so I'm probably gonna keep buying those. Anytime I get disillusioned with stuff coming out now, I'm like, there's so much great stuff that I didn't read the first time around. So.
Did they do any? I can't remember. Did you say they did any Ultraverse HeroClix?
No, the only one in one of the, I forget which set it was, but I think it was one that had to do with the Infinity Gauntlet. And I think there was a story where Rune, Barry Windsor Smith's vampire guy, had something to do with the Infinity Gauntlet. And there's a super rare Rune piece that figures in with the Infinity Gauntlet. I have not gotten that one, but I did a double take. I'm like, Rune? Wow, that's cool. The only other one that I remember making its way into a Marvel game was before HeroClix. I spent too much time and money on the card game Overpower. There's a character called Foxfire from the Exiles that was a card you could get that was one of Juggernaut's abilities, because Juggernaut popped over to the Ultraverse.
Oh, yeah.
Part of the all-new Exiles.
Yeah.
We got to pick some panels in this one. Try and find them underneath the word balloons. And I'm taking Grenade when Grenade figures his powers out, or at least tries them. I mean, it's kind of simple. It's his body glowing, but the stuff is coming off of there, and of course he looks astonished as to what in the world is going on. He doesn't understand that whole sequence of them figuring out their powers. I especially like the part where when he shoots his shrapnel out and it hits Bob, they become rose petals and are laying on the ground.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I really thought that was neat. Tiny rosebuds. But yeah, I'm taking Grenade, figuring out that he has. Holy crap, he can shoot stuff out of his body.
Yeah, his fanny pack didn't survive the experience.
What you got, Chris? Which one are you taking?
The easy one is the one I'm going to go with. I'm going to steal Evan's thunder on the full page panels. I'm going to go with the jumpstart effect crackling down on the cable car, page 4.
Nice.
Technically, you're stealing my lightning, except that was actually not the one I picked.
Oh, all right,
I didn't know there were any other full pagers in here.
There's not. It's a panel, Chris. Just when you think you can put me in a box. I did consider it.
The jumpstart effect is going to permeate throughout this whole series. I mean, that's the whole. Do they ever get an answer? By the way, I'm just curious.
Wasn't it in the Breakthrough crossover?
Yeah, they get some answers. They don't get all the answers. They get some answers in the Breakthrough storyline, which happens about 6 or 8 months into the Ultraverse.
Okay. All right, Evan, what do you got?
I actually picked the one on page 14, panel 3, after Candy slices her arm on the planer for the trees or whatever, but where she's looking and you can see the circuitry. You knew there was something unusual about her, but that's the first time you realize she's not human. And then you've got the guy, the one guy's like, oh, you'd better come up to my office. And then the other guy who's not even like pretending, he's just, if he had a thought balloon, it would be sex.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a lot going on in that panel, and it's not one where it's being dialogued to death. It's the reactions and what you see is telling the story more so than the dialogue.
To kind of paint a picture for our listeners here, Candy, after she takes off after getting hit with the jump start, she was originally wearing, I think, just a trench coat.
Yeah.
But underneath it, she's wearing lingerie. And now after she takes off from JD Hunt, she's walking around the city in lingerie and like turning heads of hundreds of guys.
She went from Gambit to White Queen.
Yeah, she did.
Blink of an eye.
Yeah, and I didn't say this in the synopsis, but one of the other driving forces is that they're kind of worried. Like, some people, they showed up for the good of the people of the city in order to try to stop it was Uriel, who was out there on the streets. They were thinking, well, we came together, but other people didn't even show up. And most likely they've all got powers. And there might be some people on that cable car that aren't exactly, good people. So we ought to band together and be prepared for something like that too. So, it's
follow that cloud.
Yeah, follow that cloud, and it is a neat concept when you think about it. These people they don't know each other. It's not like they have a history at all, and they've come together for one purpose. And there's a lot on the table for them to try to work through. Are people going to get along all the time? Are some people going to turn on others? I don't know. Tune in.
What happens when they stop being polite and start being real?
All right.
Stranger, San Francisco.
I might find a clip and put that in here. All right. Well, we've done it. There it is. That's our first 3 launch issues celebrating the launch of the Ultraverse. We did Hardcase #1, Prime #1, and The Strangers #1.
Ultraverse, it was kind of one of those for fans. There were a lot of people who read comics at the time, didn't really care about Ultraverse, but for people who were really into it, it was one of those things that's like, yeah, it was gone pretty quickly. I got out of comics in the midst of the Ultraverse thing, so when I got back into it, late '95, Marvel had already bought Ultraverse, and it was kind of on its last legs. I think they were only publishing Prime, Exiles, and Ultraforce maybe at that point. The Ultraforce comics, I started picking those up again, and it was like Prototype was there, but it was Bob Campbell was Prototype again, not Jimmy Ruiz, and Hardcase was gone. Towards the end of the Ultraforce run, like from the Marvel era Ultraforce, Hardcase comes back and like nobody knows who he is, because there was the big, when Marvel and Ultraverse merged, there was like a big event called Black September, that kind of reset everything. So the Marvel stuff not as fondly remembered, but the early Ultraverse stuff I still really like. I'm actually in the middle of a full Ultraverse read through because there are still some books, especially from the Marvel era, that I've never read. Probably a little less than a year ago, I started like a full read through. Now that I've got pretty much every comic in the Ultraverse line, I think I've pretty much got them all. There's always stuff popping up that I hear about that, that I'd never heard of before. Like I think I mentioned on one of our previous episodes where there's like some actual story material in a not previews, but like advanced comics or one of those preview catalogs from the 90s that has like actual story pages that only appeared in those catalogs. And I'm like, how am I ever going to find those?
Right.
But for the most part, I've got everything. So I'm in the middle of kind of rereading it, reading the full run and everything. And I'm really enjoying it. So hopefully Evan can find some good stuff in the dollar bins. They're pretty easy to come by, it seems like.
Every one of them made me want to read the next issue. And I mean, what more can you ask for from a first issue than that? Especially ones that came out 30 years ago.
And that's been our show here. Let's go ahead. We'll get into plugs. Evan, we'll start with you, buddy. What do you got going on there on the blog sphere?
*51.blogspot.com. Kind of took a break for a while, but I'm back posting regularly and finally doing my read through of Just Imagine Stan Lee creating the DC universe. Let's see, I've done Batman with Joe Kubert and Wonder Woman with Jim Lee, and up next is, point of this recording is Superman with John Buscema. And then hopefully I'll have a few more by the time this airs. Still, it's been a while, but I'm still committed to providing the internet with the Ravage coverage you cowards won't. Occasionally I've got a large stack of movies that you could find for $1 or $1.25 at Dollar Tree. Making my way through those, Didn't
you recently show up on Magazines and Monsters?
Yes, I did.
What was that show about?
Billy had me and Ed Moore on there to get started on Thor the Eternals saga. Before we delved into that, we looked at what Thor had been up to before that and did a quick and dirty on Kirby's Eternals. The precursor to Thor the Eternals saga included the debut of Marvel Comics superstar Red Norval.
Well, Red Norval. Oh, my gosh.
Yes. The man who would be Sif's boyfriend.
Cool factor, -2.
Oh, Jesse. I've got some panels I'll send you. It'll change.
Oh, okay, I'm sure.
I appeared on a couple episodes with Jesse Starcher.
Oh, that guy.
Of a podcast focused on Marvel Snap.
That's right. Snap material, baby. If you're a Spotify listener, you can chime in on our polls that we have out there. We have some questions we threw out to people as well. And then we talked about our top 5 unsnapped characters in the mobile game Marvel Snap. The ones that you can't find that should be in there. I mean, why in the world aren't they? So you can hear us each talk about our top 5. Chris Armstrong, let's hear it, buddy. What do you got going on?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at BirdieMan34. I also do a movie podcast with my buddy AJ called Small Screeners, where we talk about direct-to-video and made-for-TV movies. As of this recording, we just a few days ago put out our baseball, celebration of opening day was this week. So we put out an episode on 61, the Billy Crystal HBO movie about the 1961 home run race, which I'd never seen before and I liked quite a bit. So you can hear us talk about that and some other movies on Small Screeners. You
can also hear how much Chris hates baseball. I'm about halfway through the episode, but you really like the movie. I could tell. So
yeah, as I said on the episode, I don't like baseball, but I like sports movies in general. So, and a lot of those there are more baseball movies than any other sport, I'm sure. And a lot of those are really good. So
you couldn't pay me to watch golf, but I've probably watched Happy Gilmore plenty of times.
Legend of Bagger Vance.
Legend of Bagger Vance. Go back in the archive. You can listen to me and Evan, me and Chris, all of us talk 90s comics on the Unspoken Issues podcast. Over 70 episodes, closing in on 80 here. And then the Source Material Comics podcast as well, where we are just having a ball talking about comics from any age, any decade. Mark and I just finished up our discussion on comic books that deal with the metal property. So we talked about one that was Iron Maiden, one that dealt with Slayer's Repentless, and that book was awful, but oh my gosh, cannot wait till that airs because we skewer it. And then we talked Gwar Orgasmageddon, which was, of those 3, it was the greatest thing I've ever read. That's it. We are getting out of here. That is Evan Evans. That over there is Chris Armstrong. I'm Jesse Starcher. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for joining us. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Force it.
Jump on now.
Prime reached out with his mighty hand.
Come inside the pages of the Ultraverse comic book, where Prime and his Ultra heroes battle on against Enemy and his evil forces.
It's Prime time, Enemy. Fire! Sorry, Prime. Evil rules. Get him! Yeah, Prime's getting pounded. Not for long. Ghoul and Nightmare will nuke ya. Ultra cool!
New Ultra Force action figures, each sold separately. New from Galoob.